Prologue. The digger Roger Hoffman, 65. 2024. Dinosaur Park, Utah. Dr. Roger Hoffman stared out to the west across the arid land with the unsettling feeling that time was slipping away. The view from the hill gave him a long vista all the way to the horizon. The older man stood on a gentle shoulder that was slowly eroding into the plain below. The weather was still hot, but the rains would come. Soon this season, like so many before, would be over. He just hoped they would be able to recover this find before the year ended. He took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his balding head. He'd been bringing his students here for 12 years now. Dr. Hoffman looked down as his pupils knelt on pads, chipping away at the soft stone surrounding the fossil. His knees no longer allowed him to work like that. After so many years in the sun, now he did most of his work at a table in the museum, sorting through trays of fossils others had dug up long ago. So much was still unclassified. The two real discoveries that he had made in his career had both been found there, overlooked decades earlier, but it wasn't the same as being in the field. It wasn't the same as digging. Nothing matched the satisfaction of coaxing these ancient bones from the stone where they had hidden for millions of years with your own hands. Several other groups were working at different sites nearby, but most of the people wanted to be here. This was the most complete find they had made this year. Some of the other work being done was admittedly more important. Susan had found a pair of early mammals, which had died curled up together in a burrow. The little creatures were probably the most important find they had made. That find might make her entire career. It would almost guarantee her PhD, but everyone wanted to work the big bones. Turning away from the sun, he looked back at the students sweating as they meticulously exposed what was once the most feared creature to walk the earth. It didn't look like much now. Patches of plaster covering sections of the spine. Some of them had already been removed, pried up, and carried away down to the main camp below to be crated for shipping. There was one femur and part of the pelvis. Most of the tail was missing. He thought there might be the upper section of one of the arms and both scapulars. Quite a few ribs remained, but the skull was gone. Such a pity. There was nothing like finding a skull or even a mandible. If only they could have found one of its jaws full of those long sickle-like teeth. But as they dug into the hill, it simply ended. They had extended the excavation into the hillside to no avail. Two of his students were working, soaking epoxy into the broken fragments of ribs to try and stabilize them. Another group was working along the spine, carefully isolating the vertebra from the surrounding strata.
Professor.
Jeffrey peered up from where he was kneeling, squinting through what seemed to be impossibly thick Coke bottle glasses. Could the poor boy not find a pair of sunglasses to fit his myopia?
Professor, there's something here.
He was pointing at a section of the beast's spine that he had been laboring over. The professor came over and examined the area. The vertebra in question was broken, shattered in fact. The anatomical alignment was still fairly good. Well, nothing's perfect, but I wonder how that came to pass.
Well, yes, it is rather badly broken, but it looks like most of the pieces are still there. Don't try to separate it all now. Wrap it all in plaster and we'll clean it up when we get it back to the university. That's a good boy.
No, Professor, look.
He pointed to something. It was a different color from the surrounding fossilized bone, or the soft gray stone that encased it. Jeffrey scooted to the side to make way for the professor to kneel. Bending down like that was painful. Once Hoffman had composed himself, he pulled the wide-brimmed hat off his head and wiped his brow. Yes, there was something there, an erratic. The body had been covered by a fine silt but an oddball can always wash down any stream bed in a flood. It was certainly wedged in there. Odd shape. He reached into his pocket and took out his glasses. He hated growing old, but it seemed better than the alternatives. With a sigh, he bent down a bit closer to peer at this little intruder. One often found anomalous stones, gastroliths, in the digestive tract of some herbivores. The question of whether these were intentionally swallowed to aid in digestion or consumed by accident was still under debate in the community, but they had been used as evidence for migratory patterns stretching thousands of miles. This was different. Gastrolith were unknown in carnivores, and this one was embedded in the spine. The surface was flaky, a dark red with green, leaking into the surrounding stone. Part of it crumbled as he scratched at it with the dental pick that he had picked up from where his student had left it. The inside seemed more solid. It was truly odd. He couldn't decide what it was. He scratched at it harder. It was soft, and as he scratched at the back of it, the outer layer came away, leaving bright scratches. He sat back on his heels, peering at something that could not be, his mind trying to resolve the contradiction between what his eyes saw and what could not be true. Slowly, suspicion began to simmer inside him. Hoffman looked closely at the matrix that encased the vertebrae and the intruder. The stone was homogeneous. He scraped at it, blowing the dust away. He could not see any seam or line where someone might have tried to cement the... No, he couldn't say it. Cement it into the rock of their dig. He reached into the pouch on his belt and pulled out a small bottle of water. He carefully wet the matrix, looking for the edge where some prankster had tried to perpetrate this hoax. There was none. Roger Hoffman's mind became very quiet as he looked down at what could not be, and it occurred to him that the tiny bones Susan was sifting from the site a quarter of a mile from here might not be the greatest find they made this year. Someone had shot a dinosaur.